Jai Hind and welcome to Dev Talks. This is the General's Talk featuring Lieutenant General Ravi Shankar and Lieutenant General Satish Dua. Lieutenant General Ravi Shankar, PVSM, AVSM, VSM, a retired Director General of the Artillery. He has deep knowledge and understanding of strategic affairs, now a professor in the Aerospace Department of the IIT Madras, a speaker and an author. Lieutenant General Satish Dua, PVSM, UYSM, SM, VSM, has served as the Chief of Integrated Defence Staff to the Chairman of the Chiefs of Staff Committee, a former Corps Commander 15 Corps, today a speaker and an author of a book, India's Brave Hearts. General Shankar, General Dua sir, welcome to the General's Talk. Kashmir seems to be at a bit of a challenge, and the kind of activities that have been taking place in Kashmir have changed, and that is something which has been recognized by all of us in India and even across the world. Uh, General Duasa, I'd like to start with you with an opening analysis of how do you see the situation in Kashmir today, followed up by your comments, General Shankar sir.
Look, it's now been 3 years since Article 370 and 35A were diluted. 35A was abrogated. This is the first time that the Indian state has actually taken a very bold step, which was long overdue. And now the center is administering the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir directly from Delhi. During this past 3 years, especially during the first 2 years, where COVID lockdown also may have had a hand to play. In the first 2 years, there were literally no deaths in Kashmir because of security forces action. There was very little, if at all, violence on the streets. Many projects and plans as per the administration were put through. There was the outreach. The recruitment into terrorist groups had dropped significantly. So I could go on and on. So overall, the parameters, the factors were showing an upward trend. But did it take away the alienation? No. That is something that is going to take a very long time if we continue to go right. And hence, we have seen that in the recent months, let's say this year and a little earlier, the terrorists have changed tack. The other side has changed their tactics. They have started targeting soft targets. They have started targeting minorities. They have started targeting non-VIP targets, non-security forces target, so that they can strike terror in the hearts and minds of the people, so that they can banish that feeling that all is well. They can disprove that fact that things are moving towards normalcy or happy times are back here again, while taking care not to alienate tourists, etc. Because on the side of tourists, the business is booming. A lot of investments are coming in. A lot of MOUs have been drawn up where economic aspirations are slowly beginning to get met. But they have, by these targeted killings and using soft targets, they have stuck terror back into the hearts of people. So that, as a tactics, as a terrorist tactics, has been successful. So I'll just leave my opening comments there, and we'll take the discussion forward later.
Yeah, actually, what General Dua said is bang on. Let me just add a few issues to it. Oh, in the past 2 years, if you see, the levels of violence, the overall control in the state was much better. Hands-on control over the governance, everything. Simultaneously, you look at it the other side. The problems in Pakistan have multiplied, and they've had to start looking inward. Right. Probably this whole thing would have continued the same fashion even now. Okay, it might have. Though the possibility is less, it might have. But for the fact that we've had this exercise on delimitation. Now, the delimitation has its fallout. And that they would have probably realized that, look, if we do nothing and show that we are around, something will happen, and then the whole situation will go out of our hand. We cannot allow some kind of a normalcy to set in the state, political normalcy at least to come into the state, and that is why they have taken this you know thing. And what General Dua says is right. The alienation has not gone out. The state might be calm, alienation is still there. So they had to do something, and they had to do something which was low cost and easy to operate, and this is the best, right? So that is where it is at this point of time. So while it's not the toughest of times ahead, but it's not going to be the easiest of times ahead also.
I'd like to, break this thing down with regards. You've basically given us a sort of a motive of these actions taken in by these so-called groups operating in that region. I'd like to break this down a little further, sir. Now, General Dua, you mentioned about not targeting tourists, which ensures the money flow coming into that place. So they know what's right and what's wrong and what will kind of create an impact and what will create a negative impact for themselves. That understanding seems to be pretty much present. But having said that, the targeting of these kind of individuals, like a general bank manager or just a security guard coming back from his namaz from the mosque, killing him and his child. These are very, as General Shankar mentioned, soft targets. So in the long run, apart from spreading fear and this and that amongst the not local population, not indigenous population of that place, what else are they trying to achieve? Because at the end of it, do you think that these kind of killings will also start having a backlash within the citizens, on whom probably they're trying to do a favor by not targeting the tourism and everything, sir? General Dua, sir?
Look, it's like this. For decades, the terrorists shied away willfully targeting civilians. They attacked security forces. They attacked government hubs or installations, but they steered clear of the civilian population. Why? Because it is from within this population that they draw support. They do not want to alienate their support base, which is amongst the population at large. But now, as I mentioned earlier, their reasons for doing this are slightly different. That they want to strike terror in the hearts of the people, and this is the direct and the easiest way. When you target VIPs or security forces, etc., it affects the common man as just another bad news. But here it is affecting that man directly. So what they have done, they have actually tried to target a lot of them, as you know, are minority community, whether it is KPs or from Dogras. While there have been some Kashmiri Muslims also targeted, but most of them are from the security or from the government establishments. So they're trying to walk a very tight rope so as to not alienate the population largely, yet touch them with fear. And that is why they're taking care that such places are not targeted that can drive the tourists away from tourist spots, so that the fund flow comes in. And this year has been a record year as far as tourism figures are concerned. So, so far, they are managing to do it right from their point of view. Because large-scale alienation, for that to come, and as your question was, will they strike back? Who will strike back? The civil society. The civil society of Kashmir. In fact, I wrote recently in an article, the civil society of Kashmir has to actually wake up. They must be energized by the state if need be, but they must be strengthened so that they are the ones who can actually throw up these so-called hybrid terrorists. Now, what is a hybrid terrorist? The recent term that is being used nowadays. He is not a terrorist who has been trained across in terrorist camps in POK. In fact, he's not been trained at all, or almost nil training, because he does not even wield an AK rifle. Because AK rifle may require some training, but to use a grenade or a pistol, you can actually get classes online. I mean, you can actually be able to do it without much training and yet be able to fulfill your task. So that's what these terrorists are doing now. They have enlisted the youth who take part in one-off terror activities using small handguns and grenades. Thereafter, they throw that pistol away and he does not take up another task. So he does not come into the records of security forces as a terrorist at all. Such people, it's very difficult to catch such people by use of intelligence agencies and security forces. Such people can be thrown up only and be identified only by the civil society in which they live, eat, and work. So that is where this all converges, and we need to have the civil society. When I say civil society, it means not only the society elders. It means the well-meaning teachers, clergy, prominent citizens. Everyone in the civil society will have to be energized to be able to fight this scourge of terrorism. The last sentence I'd like to say: without the active involvement of civil society, such meaningful changes are not possible. The examples of Mizoram and Punjab show it. It is a civil society that eventually stood up which helped control the terrorism that it has been actually wiped out from those respective states.
Indeed, General Shankar sir, I'd like you to, your comments obviously, but the thought process behind this sort of a change in tactic, does that tell you, give you a planned thought process, or is it also because of the shortage of weapons and so on and so forth within these groups?
See, there's no shortage of weapons or anything in these groups for the kind of thing they are doing. One thing for sure, that, like I said, Pakistan preoccupied somewhere else, and the international opinion against Pakistan, there's a FATF in place, their economy is short, there are a lot of those problems. They can't do what they did earlier, that is take on the state machinery head on and fight, the establishment, as they call it, or the armed forces, the government machinery. So the way to keep this alive is this. This is a new tactic. That's about all. You also have to understand one fundamental thing. They say the insurgent is a fish which swims in the sea of people.
Mm.
Okay? You can't catch that fish. That fish will swim past that event. He's got no record, like what General Dua said. So this is an amorphous kind of a situation. And the only person who can throw this fish out is the sea. That is the people. Now, we also have to understand what we said earlier. The people of Kashmir are still alienated. I mean, let's not dream that they're with us. To get them to throw this fish out of the pond is going to be a difficult ask. And that is what is being challenged. Okay. Whether it is the current method of administration as a union territory, or tomorrow if you hold elections and a political system comes into place, the challenge before them is how to get that civil society. The answer is the civil society, but the challenge is also the civil society.
Mm.
Okay. We have to change our tactics accordingly. I mean, gone are the days when you could go around doing, a lot of actions which at a point of time were necessary. You have to react probably non-violently. I mean, you have to change tack. That's the way I see we have to go about doing things. It's no more anti-terrorism. This is not anti-terrorism. This is more anti-insurgency. There's a difference between the two.
Taking that thing forward, General Dua sir, I'd like you to dwell upon your analysis on the reduction of targeting of security forces. That's something which is very interesting to me because, previously the forces were at the receiving brunt of these kind of attacks all the time. Secondly, as General Shankar said, that there has to be a change in tact. Why don't we just discuss that further? How does the role of the security forces change in that region, sir?
So, firstly, why is there a reduction in attack on security forces? It is there because the number of terrorists are very less now. The residual terrorists in the valley are very less. Those that are there are ill-trained, if at all, or they're very poorly trained. Like I said earlier, they may be able to pick up a pistol or a grenade and brandish it, or even fire a shot, but they are unable to sort of hold out their own against a cordon of security forces which are using automatic and semi-automatic weapons. So that is where it comes in, that they can only target these soft targets: a shopkeeper, a teacher, and what have you. You know, the way we have been seeing the targets in the recent past, the people who have been targeted in the recent past. So that is the kind of shift that is coming in. What do the security forces need to do? Am I right? That was your question again. Second,
Yes.
so what do the security forces need to do? I think the security forces also must change their tactics. Security forces also must realize that, they are changing their tactics. It's not that they're not doing this. That killing terrorists, merely killing terrorists, is not enough. Like General Shankar rightly said, the difference between counter-terrorism and counter-insurgency. Now, if it's like a movement which has to be contained, so then we must think of I have already spoken about the factors of energizing the civil society, energizing the teachers, the clergy, the prominent citizens. Now that security forces might feel is not our job, but the point is those are the things that will make a difference now. On the other hand, we need to understand the information warfare is a very, very potent tool being used very well, very adroitly, skillfully, even now by the other side. To that extent, I think it is only the security forces which will have to take the lead to engage in information warfare more meaningfully. And mind you, a lot has been done over the 5-7 years. When I was a corps commander over there, we set into motion a certain process of information warfare, and there used to be a lot of resistance, but at least we started doing that. And today, I see that security forces are very involved in this, waging this information warfare or combating them. But to my mind, much more needs to be done. So I think that apart from just going after the terrorists, which must be done to contain violence, but we also need to look into the other aspects that can contain the movement as a whole. Then Shankar?
Yeah, I think so. We have to have a different attitude. Maybe a more intelligence-based, information-based approach to the whole thing. A civil society-based. You see, like I said, the biggest challenge is how do you mobilize civil society? That's the thing. Maybe get them involved in politics. You know, after all, the political process, if it starts, a lot of these issues will get absorbed in it. So the people's representation in a system, it's time for that to kick in. So there are multiple points, but they're not going to be an easy affair. It's going to be a tough ask, right? Notwithstanding whatever you say, this issue will not fade away. It's not going to fade away, whether they target the tourism or not, income or not. It's not going to fade away. So we have to think differently as to how to resolve this problem. And I think it needs a whole of a government approach.
Indeed, sir. It's a change of situation that we are seeing, and we are obviously seeing this in a couple of other areas as well, where these soft targets are being kind of hit across, and we see this as a playbook which is being put across by the other side with regards security, because as both of you have very clearly elucidated that the capacity probably to create such large events as was done before is not currently present. Sir, coming to the next question that I had is that the Indian Armed Forces have been doing a great job. There's no question about it. And the kind of CICT operations that have been spoken about are world renowned. So it's not something that we are saying because it's our forces. Uh, Having said that, we've removed a lot of terrorists. We've removed this thing. And both of you have pointed to a change in tactic. I'm going to be a little aggressive and kind of say that is it not time that when the opposition or the opponent is weak today, to take out the source of this entire, issue within those regions, the people. There are certain individuals and organizations. Do you think it's the right time to start targeting them? General Dua, sir.
To my mind, it's an oversimplification to feel that we'll be able to take out the source. It is everything is very diffused. There isn't like, one particular source, and there isn't a definitive target that you just target that and thereafter everything will wither on the vein. It won't really happen like that. There are so many wheels within wheels. There is support from across the borders, across the LOC. There are vested interest inside the separatist and the other elements inside in our own country, in the valley itself. Then there is also support that comes in from other Islamic organizations that they get. So I mean, it is there are wheels within wheels. It will not be easy to target one particular thing and say that okay, this is how we will do it. So we will, like I said earlier, also we will have to keep chipping away at violence, at terrorists wherever it happens. Like General Shankar said, intelligence-based operations to target the terrorists. But to solve the problem, we need to see as to how it should not recur with the same intensity as it was before. So to do that, we have to keep chipping away at the base. We have to marginalize the base and get more and more people who would be less alienated. How that will happen, I think time is going to be the biggest healer, because if we continue to do things right, if the youth today get their aspirations are met halfway also, everybody wants opportunities for growth. So if that happens, and on one side, like for example today, if the tourists are coming in droves, then there is a lot of tourism ecosystem that is finding their economic aspirations being met. So the moment this happens, the alienation grows down a notch. So similarly, if this sort of a thing, that ecosystem, now so much investment is going to, FDI is sort of going to be pouring in, if that is handled very well, and it starts giving, on one hand, meeting the aspirations of the people, on the other hand we have information warfare uh, being played out correctly, so that we try and change the perceptions. And on the last bit, Jan Shankar also alluded to it, we must meet the political aspirations now that the delimitations has taken place. So all these things put together we'll be able to make some difference.
See, you also have to understand whatever you're seeing today is already a low level.
Yeah.
But the root cause of the problem to a large extent were the separatists. They're out of the equation almost. They're not there. It's only the rank and file without much leadership, and no leadership has really come up. So to that extent, the level is very low. We also need to show some tolerance to this business. It will go on. Let's not expect that within 2 years, 3 years, this whole problem will resolve. Many of the problems which are as a result, or other feelings, or whatever you call it, as a result of the scrapping of Article 370 and 35A, are also at this point of time suppressed. They're not come out fully. So there are political aspirations also there in that, right? And it is not only about terrorism and separatism, it is also a felt feeling for the past 70 years, which has been taken away overnight from them. So you have to get people around to that fact that, look, whatever has been done is done for the good. And that will take a lot of convincing. That will take the government to do the whole thing. And at the same time, we have to hope like hell, and maybe, to see and hope like hell that Pakistan goes down and Pakistan doesn't recover. That also is there. You see, this is a revolving door principle. One goes in, one comes out type. So in that, if Pakistan doesn't recover, then things will be okay. If Pakistan starts recovering, we will start having issues. So this also has to be seen.
How does international geopolitics affects your domestic politics in the world is only something one can learn when you study this sort of a situation, sir.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it.
So I'm going to ask you something.
Everything has an effect on each other. the war in Ukraine is having effect on every other country, including India.
Yeah,
So all that will happen.
will happen.
It's having an effect every time you go to the petrol pump, sir.
Yeah, it is.
So,
Yeah.
anyways, I'm going to ask you something, that may be a little close to your heart, sir. Both of you have served in Kashmir. General Dua, sir, I'm going to begin with you. What would you like to do if you are given charge of this entire thing, and what would be your first steps and your pathway to kind of bring this further down? I won't say remove it completely, because that's kind of difficult, but bring it down to a tolerable level where prosperity can actually start, sir.
It's easy to put myself back in the shoes because I've been Corps Commander there. But first of all, let me put out a disclaimer before attempting to answer you, is that whatever I say does not mean that the present setup is not doing it. They are actually taking all the right steps and making the right moves. And so I'm only going to be showing a mirror to that. I think what is required, as we discussed in the passing also, in our discussion also, that hitting at terrorists or terrorism is one aspect that will go on. Smart operations, intelligence-based operations, that will have to go on always. But on the other hand, we must give a slightly added importance to the fact that there is alienation, to the fact that there is radicalization. And these are the aspects that must be addressed. And security forces also will perhaps have to play a responsible part in doing this, because otherwise it won't be possible. So, on one hand, we are hitting at terrorists. On the other hand, we are energizing the civil society, strengthening our information warfare tactics, so that we can actually bring down the alienation. And lastly, I think we also need to, if I were there, I would strongly recommend to the government that we, as soon as the time is right, because delimitations are taking place, so we must now give vent to the political aspirations of the people. Of a first has been created after decades, that there is a three-tier panchayat rule. So grassroots empowerment has taken place in the state. And now is the time for them to have an elected body, so that they can be held, that is, the Kashmiris can be held responsible for the state of affairs in the state. Hopefully, the next step would be giving it full statehood as well. So that's what I would like to see.
I'd just like to reinforce what he said. I mean, whatever the security forces are doing, all that is there. They know the playbook well. Okay. I mean, I think the time has come where you open up the political field. You have to start looking at statehood back to Kashmir. There is a big alienation because of a state being turned into a union territory. Give it back. Like the last point which General Dua said is important. Let Kashmiris solve their problem. And unless you give them the power to solve that problem, they will not. Right. So that is they also need some motivation to solve their own problems, rather than all solutions coming from outside. So that's where I leave it.
Indeed, I think you both mentioned a very interesting thing. I'm going to just term it with one word: involvement. I think that is the key to the entire situation. It's by what you both have elucidated to. It is something that we need to take the people along. There's nothing else. Work is being done to get money into their hands, but there's a lot of work needs to be done.
I'll just give you an example.
Mhm.
This is not related to Kashmir. This is related to the East. In a troubled area in the East, I remember a road was being built, a 4-lane highway was being built, and a lot of progress was coming. And I was discussing this with a militant leader who was under, what do they call, who was under peace talks with the government. So ceasefire, they were under ceasefire with the government, right? So I was telling him, look, all this is coming in, so why are you still continuing? So he gave me something which was very important. He said, sir, life and people are not just about development, it's also about aspiration. That aspiration and development, unless they coincide, things won't progress. So the question is here also, aspiration of the people and the development which you're undertaking have to coincide. And that has to be done by themselves, not by us.
True. By themselves is a catchword phrase. We've also been talking about this. If you allow me, I like to put out a statement which I wrote in an article recently in the Quint. Counterterrorism is not a spectator sport between security forces and terrorists, with the civil society acting as ringside spectators. They will have to get involved. They will have to get involved um, uh, at at grave risk to themselves at times.
To get something, I think the risks are always there, and I think that's something, the aspiration word, which is very interesting, and what you also said, that it's not a spectator sport. So till now, I guess a lot of people would have this in mind, that whatever problem is there, central government, वो लोग आके आर्मी शार्मी देखेंगे, हमको
Exactly.
क्या फर्क पड़ता है?
Bilkul. They have outsourced their problems to others, so they'll have
Yeah.
to get
So
involved.
yeah, that's an interesting thing. When the problem may get a bit worse for the people, but at some point of time they'll say enough, stop this. And yeah, I mean, normally most of the solutions like Punjab and the East as well has come through the people.
Yes.
So interesting. So I think this is something that not a lot of people talk about within the parlance of Kashmir, especially on the television sets that we see about. It's mostly directed towards Pakistan. I'm glad we've kept it at a very minimal basis in terms of Pakistan. Interesting discussions, sir. Always intelligent, comments from both of you. It's always a pleasure. Till next time for another subject on another day, sir. Jai Hind.
Jai Hind. Thank you.
Thanks.
Chalo.